Hey, my name is Chris, and welcome to Coding in Public. Today we're going to work on this really simple to-do list application, and it lives locally here in your browser storage, so you can come in here and type like task 1, task 2, and just hit enter each time, or you can hit this plus icon. If you hit it early, nothing happens. You've got to have something in there, and then it'll save them here for you, and if you refresh the page, or even if you come back to it, close the tab down and open it back up in the same web browser on the same machine, it'll actually save all of your tasks for you because we're going to save them in the local storage. When you're done, you can just click exit and it'll get rid of whatever task you've clicked on. And again, you can add more tasks here. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So we're going to build this to-do list over 2 videos. And the first one, we're going to focus on just HTML and CSS. And then the second one is where we'll apply everything with JavaScript. So the HTML and CSS are fairly basic, but I figured I'll break this out into 2 videos anyhow. So first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to build everything in this SRC folder and then let Parcel build it for us and actually put it in a distribution folder. And if you don't know anything about Parcel, I did a video on it recently and I'll make sure to remember to add that to the description. But all we have to do is come in here and do npm init. I'll do -y so I don't have to answer all those questions yes anyhow, but it'll just drop in here this package.json, which will track our dependencies and things like that. Then I'm going to come in here and install Parcel. All right, sped that up so you don't have to watch the entire thing. But then all we have to do is come up to our package.json file and switch out this test script for a dev script that I grabbed just from the Parcel documentation. If you're going to use this for production, you probably want to use the build command as well. And again, they detail that both. It details that both in their documentation and the video I made earlier that you can watch in the description. Okay, with that set up, all we need to do now is in this SRC folder add our files. So we'll say index.html, and then inside our index.html, let's go ahead and just do like a kind of generic boilerplate here, and we'll call this my to-do list. And now we will create a Sass file, and so I'll just call this main.sass, and I will also create a JavaScript file called main.javascript. Okay, and then let's link these here. I'll go ahead and do this quickly. All right, I've got both that style sheet and the script linked actually just up in the head. Now you might be like, wait, I thought you had to load JavaScript after the body. Well, you do, and that's what this defer attribute does for it. It'll load it after the whole body has loaded. And you might also be asking, I thought you had to link CSS instead of SCSS in your document. Well, you do, but you can actually load SCSS and Parcel will convert it, and then in the distribution folder that will be created here in just a moment, it'll spit out a CSS file that it's compiled from this SCSS file. So all that to say, that's why I've got it set up the way I do. It's because of kind of the way that Parcel works. All right, so now I'm going to come in here and let's just drag this down below here. And all I have to do is type npm run dev, which is that script that we created, and it'll automatically pull this up over this way. Now I can just focus on writing HTML and CSS, JavaScript, all that kind of stuff, and it'll take care of it for me. So to make sure stuff is working, let's go ahead and pull up this terminal here, or the console, and we'll just do like console log, it's working. And it is working. Okay, so our JavaScript file is working, and then let's pull up both of our CSS and make sure we've got our index.html page up and going. These are the 2 we're going to work on today, like I mentioned, and then we will come back and fill out the JavaScript in the next video. So let me zoom up just a bit here, hide the side panel, and I'll leave this running just in case we make some grievous errors so it'll scream at us. Okay, so we're going to keep it pretty basic today. We're going to have a container div. Inside this container div, we will have a form. And right now, the action will just be nothing because we're going to prevent the default action in JavaScript anyhow once we start to build that out. Above that here, let's go ahead and add a h1 tag, and we'll just say something like my to-do list. Our form is just going to have an input, and it will be a type of text. We'll give it a name of to-do input. That will also be the exact same ID we give it, so we'll just call that to-do input. And then finally, let's add a placeholder. This placeholder will just say enter a new task. All right, if I hit save, Parcel dumps everything over here, and I've got enter new task, so form, and then the H1 up here. Okay, the next thing is we're going to add a button, and this button will say exactly nothing, but I'll have a few things in here. We'll say it's a type submit, and it's for, which links it to a form input field, and it's for that to do input, and this name and for link together here. Okay, and then we'll say ID is task submit. That's the button we're working on. All right, we've got just two more things left to do. One is we're going to add a unordered list here, and I guess we should have given that a class. So let's say unordered list. We're going to call it our task list. And there's going to be nothing in there. And then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to add a template tag. Template tags allow you to essentially put HTML that will not be rendered by the browser, but you can use that in your JavaScript or whatever. There are a couple ways you can do this, but I think this is the easiest, so we don't have to manually add each of these things in JavaScript. So we'll come in here and say template, and we're going to add a ID of task template, just so we can easily reference that in JavaScript. And then we're going to come down here and we're going to have an li with the class of task, and inside that will be a paragraph with the class of task text, and next to that, which is what this plus symbol does with emmet, we will have this button with an ID of task delete. Okay, and that is it. That's all the HTML we're going to write. Let's go ahead and open our Sass file here. Now before we do anything, let's go ahead and add some kind of default styling options. So we'll say border of 0, margin of 0, padding 0, and box sizing of border box. If I save, come over here, stuff has already started to work the way we want it to. Next, let's go ahead and grab a Google font. Let's see, I think the one I used was called like Shadows into Light Google font. I don't know, it seems like kind of handwriting-ish. But you can come in here and I'll just import it here directly into my CSS and then grab this font family here. So if I come down here, let's go ahead and apply some of that. So we'll say body, and we'll do font family, shadows into light. Let's set a few defaults. So we'll say font size is like 1.3 rem. I think this text needs a little bit of a letter spacing, so we'll do letter spacing 1 pixel. And now we're going to start to kind of style how we want that to-do list to work. So let's remember we have this container here, so let's go ahead and set that container in the middle of everything. Easiest way to do that is just do display grid and place items center. You could also do flex and then justify content center and align item center, but that's one extra line, so why not keep it a little more simple? And then we'll say background color. Let's do like some kind of light gray. And you know what, let's, rather than, if I do it here, you see it starts to refresh, but let's go ahead and add this to a variable up here. Now we're using Sass, so we can just do variables like this. So let's say light, and then we'll pull light in down here. Obviously, you can also do a CSS variable, which would be like a double dash first and then the variable name. Either one would work fine since we're in a Sass file. All right, next, let's say min height is 100 view height, and min width is 100 view width. And this will place all this directly in the center here. And so that we can see it, let's say container. Okay, let's add a background color of white. We don't need to make a variable here. You can just name it white and the browser will know that you're trying to grab white. I mean, we could also make a variable, but we'd probably just call it white. So let's just leave it where it's at. Also, just to make it mildly responsive here, let's do max width of like 800 pixels. So that if we add some really long text, it won't stretch all the way to the edge of the screen here. Let's do a padding of 2 rem. And then let's add a little box shadow. And that box shadow will be something like, let's do 1 pixel, that's left to right, 2 pixels up and down. We'll make the blur 15 pixels, and then we'll do RGB A. Let's see. Here's another one where maybe we want to use some kind of a variable. Let's come up here and we'll have a variable called primary. And let's just name this like 333. All right, that's like a dark gray. It's yelling at me because I don't have anything down here yet. And let's add this as the color of the whole body. So this will be our text color as well. So primary. And then we'll come in here, and because we are using Sass, we can actually just use our variable directly in here, which will actually be this hex code, and then just do like 0.4. I don't know. That's probably a little too dark. How about 0.15? Something like that. Okay. And yeah, I think that looks okay. All right, so we've got stuff placed in the center. Let's go ahead and grab that H1. And before we do anything too much more, let's add 2 more colors. Now let me grab my color for my blue color and then my red color for that delete. And for blue, we have 255 ED. For red, we have F44034. And then we can use those here down below. So we'll say color of the H1. Let's use our blue variable here. We'll text align center, and we'll add a margin bottom of 1 rem. All right, and here's our form still. Our button is actually over here. It's just hidden because it has no height or no background or anything. So let's come in here, and the next thing we need to do is grab that form. The form just has these 2 elements in it, so let's use display grid, and we're going to actually set them off on columns. You could use display flex as well, but we'll come in here and say display grid. So that we can see what's going to happen, let's go ahead and style the button at least. So we gave that an ID of task submit. Let's say background color is going to be blue. And background image, you may have noticed I had 2 items in this source folder when we started the project, and we're going to use this plus square here. So we'll say URL plus square. We also need to give it a height and a width. So we'll say a height or width of like 3 rem, and we'll do the same thing for the height. And now it shows up there. Obviously, we don't want it to look exactly like that, so we'll do background repeat, no repeat. Let's do background position of center. Places it right in the middle there. Perfect. Let's come back up to our form now. You can see our grid has layered those one after the other. Let's just say grid template columns. And we'll do 1 fraction. That will be our input field, our form, and then we'll do 3 rem, since that's the size of our submit button. See, it stacks it right next to each other for us. And as we shrink and expand this, it will do, as we type in here, it'll hide it kind of behind there, but those 2 will stay the same. As this whole container stretches, the form will get bigger, but the button will always stay at just that 3 rem. Okay, next we're going to add a border around this kind of whole area here. So we'll say border 3 pixels solid. We're going to use that same blue color. We'll do a padding of like 0.5 rem. Gives it a little bit of space there and kind of sets it off. Because we've hidden all this by default, we're actually going to come and hide this outline as well when we click in this. We need some way to distinguish that you can click here aside from the placeholder text. So let's come down here and we're going to grab that task, or what do we call that, to do input. This is the actual form input field that you can put things into. We'll say font size. We want to inherit. By default, this is going to use a lot of the same stuff. By default, your form is going to grab a bunch of stuff from the browser. All we're going to do is say, hey, don't use the browser stuff, use my stuff. So we'll say font family, inherit. And then we'll just say margin of 0 and 0.5 rem. What this does is just set off this a little bit from the left and the right here so that it's not smashed up against the button or the side. Next, let's come in here and we can nest because we're using Sass. We can say, let's grab the placeholder. And we'll say the placeholder should be opacity of 0.4. And when we focus on it, we're going to actually bring that opacity up to show them that they've still focused on it. So let's come in here and say opacity 4, and we'll do a transition here of just the opacity, 0.1 second, and we'll just do ease out. And then we'll come down here for that focus state. We're going to remove the outline, and that way it doesn't show that blue border here. When I save, oh, I added 2 colons here, so when I save and I come back over here, you see it doesn't show that, and now the spacing all looks right. If I come here long enough, you'll see it still gives us space for our button there. Also, you'll notice when I click in here, it's still staying this light opacity. So let's also come in here and say that when we focused, we want the placeholder, we want the opacity to go to 1. That way when we come in here, you see how it jumps all the way up to 1 there, and tells us that we're entering that field. Now we would have clicked on it as well, but even if we tab into it, you'll see that happens, and that's because of focus. Okay, let's go ahead and hide that sidebar to give us a little more space here, because we need to reference some of this stuff over here in our HTML. We're getting pretty close. All we need to do now is build out this UL down below. So this UL we called our task list, and we're just going to say it needs a margin top of 2 rem. And now we're going to have all these LIs down below. So let's go ahead and just copy this up temporarily. This is what we're going to add with JavaScript. We'll say like task 1, something like that. All right, you see it shows up right there for us. Let's now grab our task itself. This is the LI. And we want this to display kind of horizontally. So we could do the same thing we did up above here. So we can say, let's go ahead and grab the same text here, this display grid, because we're going to have both the task and then the button over this direction. We'll actually have the same padding as well so that it looks the same as up top, so 0.5 rem. That will pull that in from the sides and kind of up and down as well. And then let's add some margin on the top. We'll do 1 rem and 0. We'll have both a border bottom, 3 pixels solid, and we'll use that light variable again. And we'll do the same thing for the top. And that will distinguish kind of each task from the others next to it. All right, we're almost done. Let's just now go to our task text. This is the actual text in here, this task text right there. We're going to just add a little bit of padding to it so it sits off kind of like our input field up above. Let's do like 0.5 rem, 1 rem. This is now the right. Now we're back at the bottom, and now we're at the left. What this does is add equal padding on left, bottom, and top, but then on the right here we get just a little bit more padding to space it out from the button over that way. Speaking of the button, I think that's all we've got left, and we've got a similar button up here. So let's go ahead and add some of this. Let's see, let's grab the image repeat, the position, the width, all of that, it's going to share with this task submit. So let's come in here, actually maybe up above task submit. We'll grab task submit and then our button, which was task delete. And both of these will share that same, those same traits. And then all we have to do is, let's go ahead and duplicate this and grab our task delete. And we're going to change this to red and change this to, what do we call that? X square, I think. Okay, so now that shows there. The last thing we need to do is both of them are going to have some kind of hover state, but they're going to have different colors. So I guess we'll actually probably need to add those here. So we'll say on hover for the submit, we'll do a box shadow of 2 pixels, 3 pixels, 10 pixels. So this is left, up and down, left, right, up and down, and then the blur. And then again, we'll use sass to just grab our variable and add some kind of opacity to it. And when we hover, it should show that. We want it to pop up as well. So we'll say transform scale like 1.1, something like that. Come in here and it pops up like that. Let's go ahead and add a transition on both of these up here, and we'll just say all 200 milliseconds, and we'll do ease in. So we come up here, pops up this way. Okay, perfect. All right, now we need to do the same thing here for task delete, except let's change this to red. And I suppose we could put the hover on both of them here, but you get the point. It's close enough. Now, I don't think either of these are going to have a cursor yet, so I think we do need to add that still too. Cursor pointer. And now when we come over this way, that should show for us. Okay, so that's all the HTML and CSS we're going to do. In the next video, we'll look at the JavaScript and how to get this to actually work. If you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe. That really helps the channel. There's really no way for me to get this content out to others without people like you clicking that like button. So if you can do that, that would be a huge help to me, and I will see you in the next video. Happy coding.